So today we're here talking about, well, being saved by angels, basically. And when I picked that topic, I don't know where it came from my unconscious, but I know that when I was doing a Bible study course many years ago, 30 years ago, over 30 years ago, that was when I was starting to look at the scriptures and reinterpreting descriptions of angelic visitation as extraterrestrial contact. And I've thought a lot about that since then, about the connection and about what else they could be, and then that leads to, well, what are extraterrestrials? And that's just a term that we use so that we can talk about all these things, isn't it? We don't really fully understand a lot of these things, but only elements of them. So, and then I started I remember a case years ago. I read in a newspaper article, I think it was pre-internet, and I don't know where that article is now, but it was a story of a plane that was flying out of Africa, and they had burns victims in the plane. And the people on the plane, the pilots on the plane, reported that they were flying in the air, and then they were sort of zapped by this bright light, and all the people in the plane, their burns were healed immediately. It was like a miraculous healing. Now, I couldn't follow that up. I've thought about it. I've looked at it on the internet. I can't find anything anywhere about that. But it made me wonder about what was it that actually happened to those people? What happened to those people on the plane who were zapped by that light? And why were they miraculously cured? So, again, that brought me back to the interpretation, or I guess you could say, how beings intervene at various times when human beings are under duress and sometimes close to death, sometimes fearful of being close to death too. And that happened to me when I was really ill some years ago. So, so that's where this topic came from, right? And angels themselves, we don't really understand them. We know what's written about them, we know what people report, but we don't really know what they are, where they come from, why they're here, really what their role is, and why they intervene at some times and not other times. That's always a question that I get from people who, for example, have close encounters. Why did that happen to me and not somebody else, These are some things that we can just ponder about, I guess. So we're talking about saved by angels. This is actually off a cover of a book by the same name. And who or what are angels? And we know that, well, let's put it this way. Angels have been depicted throughout history as having wings, but we've also been told, and whether this is accurate or not, that that is to represent them as being close to spirit, close to our non-physical realities. You can call those things individual things, or you can put them together and call it spiritual, non-physical realities. I don't know. Make up your own mind. I really don't know. But they certainly appear to be spirit beings at first, and we'll get into that. And they can commune between our physical reality and non-physical realms. That's what people think. And that's what some of those angels have actually told people throughout history. They act as messengers. Sometimes they come to give an individual information that is just for them. Sometimes they appear and give groups of people information for that particular group. And we'll get onto a story later where they intervened in a English-German war situation in that as well. They protect and direct humans and situations. Again, why? I don't know. Why do they pick some people to do that for and others not? I don't know. And angelology is not new. It's not a new agey thing. It's been around for a long time. And it was developed in ancient Persia, which is now Iran, isn't it? I think. Yeah. So, and it grew from there. I don't know the exact time. But in the Christian Bible, which is what I can talk about because I did study it for years, they appear in human form, and they appear to people in dreams, and they appear to people in visions. And you know that quote there, that scripture from Hebrews where it says, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares." So that, if you unpack that, it seems to indicate that they can be here among us in physical form. There are stories in the Bible where they talk about them sitting down and having meals with human beings. They can touch other humans. They can communicate. I don't know if they had wings under their robes. I wasn't there. It doesn't say. So they can move through human civilization and pass themselves off as us. And that's always something to remember. They appeared at the prediction of Isaac's birth. Remember that story of Isaac and his wife? Oh gosh, I've forgotten her name now. And they always wanted children, and they couldn't have children. And Sarah, thank you, Ron. And the angel said, "You will have a child within the year." And Sarah said, "No, that's not going to happen. I'm too old. Blah blah blah." And passed it. Well, she felt pregnant and she had a child, right? So the angel came to tell them about that. For what purpose? How well do you know your biblical history?
No,
do you know why? I've forgotten too, sorry. The angel Gabriel appeared to Mary to tell her that, "Suck it up, girl, you're about to get pregnant." And there's no man involved. And, you know, could you imagine, if that's a true story, can you imagine that happening? If an angel appears to you, or a being appears to you and said, "This is going to happen." I mean, that's pretty big stuff. But I do know that people have visions, and beings do appear to them as they report. So anyway, they appeared to shepherds to announce the birth of Jesus, or this particular one, but a few of them appeared. There was one that appeared, and there were other beings seen around them in the background, in the sky, to tell them about it. This guy looks like, "Oh no, do I really have to go? Do we really have to pack up and go?"
Bit over, really.
Yeah, a little bit too much alcohol for that one, I think. So, strange things happen when angels appear. They often announce, "Do not be afraid," because they scare people, right? It scares people for these beings to appear. The appearance at the tomb of Jesus caused Roman soldiers to become like dead men. So you can imagine that. So they must have just fainted with, fright, that's for sure. And Daniel's description is, "A man clothed in linen with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude." And I've heard people talk about that before. Everything about them just stupefies human beings. Just stupefies them. They could clearly communicate in the language of those they served as well. So, as you were saying before, Tim, telepathic. Yes. Perhaps, yes. And could commute, and the sound of their voices just booms right through human beings. Yeah. Many other stories have reported that as well. Emanuel Swedenborg in the 18th century, he claimed to commune with angels, and he wasn't the only one. He wrote that book, Heaven and Hell. Has anyone ever read that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, this is a book that I find, I've got this book upstairs, the Urantia book. I have spoken about it before. They talk about the midways that exist between mortal realms and angelic orders. And the Urantia book is the book of Earth. and how Earth came into being, about the universe as well, and about the hierarchical structure in our non-physical reality, okay, of beings out there. As much as it says, as much as we have life here on planet Earth and all the various life forms, there are many other life forms in these non-physical realms as well, but we're just unaware of them. At times, they make themselves physical. Some of them have the ability to be both physical and non-physical. Now the midways, there's many orders of midways. So you have the messengers, who are quick and reliable personal... Oh, let me back that up, sorry. The Book of Urantia, let me go back. The Book of Urantia, the Urantia book, I always call it the Book of Urantia. The Urantia book came into being through channeling. I meant to have the book down here because it's a tome. Anyway, and it happened in the 50s. And what happened was, there was a gentleman who started to have strange, who was overcome, and he started to present with strange fevers, and then he'd go into this altered states of consciousness, and then he'd start blurting all this information out. Well, of course, it scared the hell out of his wife. So, and that went on for a while before she said anything to anyone. And what happened was, the neighbours, the man was a doctor, and his wife, I don't know whether she was a psychologist or whether he was a psychologist and she was a doctor. I'm not really sure. I think he was a doctor. Anyway, medical doctor. So the woman told the neighbour, they came over and they investigated. They observed what was going on with him. And of course they thought it was something really strange. And what happened was, it was over an extended period of time that they recorded everything that he was saying, because it became so intriguing to them. Very interesting. All the information that he was telling them was just piqued a huge curiosity. So they recorded it all, and eventually the book was published with no authors, no claim to fame by anybody. It was just published, and it took, I think it was about, the recording went on for about 5 years, and then it took about another 15 for them to condense it all down into a book, I think, something like that. So it didn't come into existence very quickly, but it did eventually get published, and there is a Urantia Foundation. The thing I find really interesting about the book is that the pages are paper thin. The book's about this big, it's about that thick, and it's more like a Bible rather than anything else. And it's full of all this interesting information about all these beings that exist in around Earth, around our solar system, in our galaxy and out there, you know. It's huge. And for me, that's interesting because of the extraterrestrial connection too. So in there, there's these orders. Some of them are messengers who are quick and reliable, who give quick and reliable personal communications. And some of those, you know, some people would interpret them as angels, I'm guessing. Then these planetary sentinels who are guardians, and they patrol the invisible spirit realm of the planet. And that got me thinking, what about these people who work for various organisations doing remote viewing? Who do they come across, you know, when they're out there? And I remember years ago, Duncan Rhodes, the editor of Nexus magazine, he said that he'd been communicating with people about people doing psychic spying and psychic protection, because people try and get into the archives of CIA, FBI, not NASA, anyway, various places, trying to look at their records. So they found that they had to then have psychic protection. And this is people remote viewing and wandering around and doing just this sort of thing, protecting their interests, acting as guardians. So I wondered, well, who else did they bump into out there? Anyway, contact personalities. These are beings that are employed in liaisons of the spiritual and material worlds, often involved in mediumship. So when a medium sits to receive the information from whoever, there are these beings who are there overseeing and beside or with those that are communicating as well. So there's not just willy-nilly communication out there, it's all overseen, apparently. I'm just telling you what's in the book. But you know, when you think about some of these things, it starts to make sense. It seems logical to me, some of it. And then there are these progress helpers. So they're assistants to the various orders of seraphim who function in special groups on the planet. And these appear to be beings that look after, I guess you say, group situations. That may be anything from disaster situations to groups that are working towards something that is beneficial for the planet, something like that, but in group situations. And basically these midways act as intelligence corps for the supernatural authorities. And they study and observe world races, and they are evolutionary creatures like we are. They can evolve and grow in their understanding through their experiences too. About the midways being overseers, communicators. I mean, to me, as the more I was reading parts of that book, the more it was becoming apparent to me that what we don't see is highly intricate, and non-physical reality is highly intricate, just like it is here on Earth, and everything's connected. You know, like we have the animals and the plants and the and people and oceans and rivers and air and all that. Everything plays a part, and it's my perception of what I thought the afterlife might be like sort of changed around and reordered itself, to how orderly this really is. Yes, Lee Heather. Yes, he came to a meeting to speak about remote viewing, and he that was when he said that we tried to remote. He was working with Courtney Brown, wasn't it? Yeah. And he was saying how they tried to remote view God. Well, they got nothing. But when they tried to remote view the afterlife, they got something. Yeah. And this is what they tuned into when they were remote viewing. All these different beings. Now this brings me to the Nephilim. Many of us have heard about them. Speak, Cheryl. Those in the Bible. Oh, not really. Yeah, actually. Where they took the daughters of men, these huge beings came down to earth and took these daughters of men for their wives or lovers, etc. But in the Urantia book, it talks about the Nephilim as being a mutant midway race that got out of control, and they were doing a few naughty things that was not approved of by these so-called hierarchies. So this is the Battle of Mons, this is what I was talking about, in 1914, where amidst this battle between the English and the Germans, these angels appeared. This group of angels appeared, and they seemed to support the English.
Of course.
Who wrote that book? Yeah. Who wrote that book? But not only them, but there were many, many reports of that, and there were many, many reports of these bowmen showing up and being seen. And they weren't just from the English. Okay, this is afterwards. There were people on the German side as well. They reported it as well. So, and they weren't quite physical. So what were they? What were they really? And why bowmen? Why bows? Right? So, now let's come forward to present, closer to modern times. So this is the story of Bruce Van Natter, and I just realised when I was looking at this the other day, they've got a double of him over here. I don't know how that happened, but anyway, we're probably not putting the picture together.
Yes.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed it before. But anyway, what happened was he was, and I'm going to play a clip in a minute of him telling this story, but basically, semi-trailer falls down on him.
Oh.
Basically, nearly cuts him in half, like about that much to go through. And when that happened, these two beings large, bright beings appeared to him, and they were put their hand. I think they said. I looked at a few of his clips. In one of them, he said they put their hands over him, and in that moment, the pain just completely disappeared. So I'll just play that clip. Oh, I'll get my volume in case it's not loud enough.
Bruce Van Natta loved trucks, and his job as a self-employed diesel mechanic helped this Christian family man live out his power truck dreams and provide for his wife and 4 children. He never gave a second thought to the dangers of working on engines that weighed thousands of pounds until November 16th, 2006.
I was working on a Peterbilt logging truck about an hour from our home. And the guy that I was working with that day, the driver of the truck, asked me if I would look and try and diagnose one more problem, one more leak before I left. So if you can picture one of these great big Peterbilt trucks, here's the front bumper. And I slipped underneath that great big chrome bumper feet first. And he had the front axle jacked up in the air and the passenger side wheel removed. The axle is going right across my chest at this point, maybe an inch or two above my chest.
Then just as Bruce slipped under the truck, the 20-ton capacity jack holding up the truck shot out from its position.
And this 10,000, 12,000 pounds of weight that is on these 2 front wheels on this axle came down across my midsection, basically like a blunt guillotine, and just crushed me in half. Blood had splattered the inside of my throat, the back of my throat when it fell. And I could see that there was less than an inch of airspace between the bottom of the axle and the cement. So I knew that I was thinner than it, my body was thinner than an inch. The man jacked the truck up off of me. I begged him to get me out from underneath the truck. He didn't want to because he could tell that I had to have a broken back, and I did. My vertebrae in my back were cracked the width of the axle. It was the most incredible pain you can think of. I've never felt any kind of pain like that. The very next thing it is, I just called out, "Lord, help me." I called it out twice, "Lord, help me."
Instantly, all of the pain left Bruce's body.
At that point, I went unconscious. My spirit left my body, floated up into the ceiling, and now my spirit is looking down on the accident scene from above. The man I've been working with was on his knees above my body. He's talking, I can hear him talking. He's saying things like, I'm sorry. But on each side of him, also on their knees, was a huge angel. Their heads stuck up at least this much taller than his head. So if you would have stood them up, they would have had to been like 8 feet tall. They did not have wings. They were just very broad shoulders. Again, between the 2 angels and him, it took up the whole front of this truck. There was a bright light shining around each one of them. They were matching bookends. They looked identical. They just had their arms underneath the truck, not holding the truck up, but had their arms angled in towards my body. There was no pain. In fact, just peace. And I can't even describe, words can't describe the peace that I felt in the ceiling.
Bruce knew he had a serious choice to make.
I was definitely on the verge of life and death. There were 2 voices, thoughts in my head. One was, shut your eyes, give up and die, and you're just gonna go to heaven anyway. It was very loud. There was another voice in my head, thought, much quieter, more of a whisper, and that one said, if you want to live, you're going to have to fight, and it's going to be a hard fight. And next thing I knew, my spirit went back down into my body like that, just like a shot.
Bruce was conscious as he was flown on a life flight to the hospital. Doctors there doubted he would even survive the next few hours. His ribs were broken, his pancreas and spleen crushed, and several major arteries had been severed.
I had 5 places that major arteries were completely severed. I found out from doctors that there was a medical study done in 2001. According to that study by the University of Southern California, they've used my case and compared it against that study. And according to that, they can't find anyone else in the world that's ever lived with 5 major arteries being severed. So I should have bled to death in just a few minutes. So my thought is the angels were there to somehow hold me together.
Bruce stayed in the hospital for over 2 months and survived 5 major surgeries. Yet he had overwhelming obstacles to overcome. Almost 75% of his small intestines were crushed in the accident and had to be removed.
Adult has 18 to 20 some feet of small intestine, they say, roughly. Somebody came in and told us they didn't expect me to live much more than a year. I'm going to starve to death. I was losing weight very rapidly. They're feeding me intravenously.
Bruce's once 180-pound frame dropped to 126 pounds. But Bruce's family was praying and his community rallied around him. Then Bruce received an unexpected visitor in his hospital room one day.
The Lord woke up a man in New York 2 days in a row, someone that I met one time on vacation. And he came and prayed for me in the hospital, put his palm on my forehead, and when he prayed the way Jesus taught us to pray, and he spoke to the mountain, in this case my intestine, and he said, small intestine, I command you to supernaturally grow back in length in the name of Jesus Christ. And when he did, it felt like 220 volts came out of his palm into my forehead, right into my body, and I could feel my intestines moving around and going up and down.
After a long 9 months of surgeries and hospital stays, Bruce was eventually able to feed himself, and he gained weight all the way up to 170 pounds. When he returned for testing, radiology reports and doctors confirmed that he had almost 9 feet of small intestine. His intestines had doubled in length.
When they test me, they say that the intestines the Lord gave me back were twice as good as normal. Even though I don't have my full amount, he gave me several feet back. Even though it's half as much, they absorb the vitamins, the minerals, the nutrients that I eat into my body normally. Over and over, the Lord kept confounding the doctors from the point of them saying that I shouldn't have lived, I should have bled to death, to my intestines miraculously coming back. Over and over, God was showing that miracles are happening. My pancreas rejuvenated by itself, my spleen rejuvenated by itself, miracle after miracle after miracle. God just kept showing up and showing himself very real and strong, that he is the miracle worker.
Today, through their organization, Sweetbread Ministries, Bruce...
I'll just stop it there. I'm going to go on with their religiosity. But isn't that an interesting story? Mm-hmm. Not only did he survive that, his organs grew back and his intestines, some of it grew back. It's like, take out his interpretation, his Christian interpretation. I mean, what the heck was that? Mm-hmm. And why is the other question. Why? Why him? And it's something that struck me recently, well, actually, through this group, actually, with looking at some information, is that it seems that some things can only come into play either at the point of death or as we approach death. So, you know, people can access otherworld realities, but but all of us seem to be able to do that as we get closer to death. That's my understanding from what I've put together. And it can only start to come into play when we get to that point too, for some reason. It's like there's a change in us, our mind changes, our body changes, our emotional state changes, and somehow that seems to be the catalyst for things like people having deathbed visions or that sort of thing. So, and I know that the medical profession will say, oh, it's because the brain's doing things, and it's, you know, the unconscious is saying, well, it's getting you prepared for death and blah, 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 and all that sort of stuff. Yes, I understand all that. But there are so many other things that come into play, like Dr. Peter Fendick, when I spoke about him last year, and he's a neuroscientist who's been studying death, basically, and how, you know, people can start having changes in themselves up to 2 years prior to death. They can start to have visions. They can start to change their language. Some of you might remember that if you were here. How their language starts to change the closer they come to death. Like they talk about seeing a dead brother or sister might be coming to pick them up and they're going to take them for a trip. Or my mother was here and she's going to take me, we're going to go on a train. So their language changes, and then sometimes people can start to hear music as well. So, and there's been a play put together about that. There's been a recording session put together about a researcher about that. The music that people can hear just before they die, or the report that they hear, all those types of things. But they don't come into play until you start to approach death.
Yeah.
And it seems to be that when human beings are under duress, that's when they can have these experiences.
Yes.
Even Tino, who spoke here last year and at the UFO group, he was going through a very difficult emotional relationship breakdown. And during that time, He spoke about how all synchronicity was really heightened, how there was a lot of things that were being moved in the house that couldn't possibly be moved. One was his ex-wife's, I think it was her grandfather's chair that was so big, she didn't move it, he didn't move it, the wind couldn't move it, it would keep moving, they'd put it back and it'd move again. All those types of things. And through that whole period, there were a lot of strange things happening to him. And I know in my case, when I was ill over that 10-year period, particularly through the 3 years where I was acutely ill and had a near-death experience, it was in that 3-year period that I had a lot of paranormal experiences. So I think it has to do with that too, that trauma, duress, seems to create a portal, or not portal, but a connecting device, put it that way, to other things entering into this reality, or for us to go, for our minds to go there. I don't really understand it, but that's what it appears to be at this stage. One more clip, and then we can continue, and then we'll have some discussion.
We turn now to a story that some say is a true miracle. A woman trapped in the wreckage of a car crash as rescue workers try in vain to free her. Like an answer to a prayer, help arrives just in time, but that is the beginning of the mystery. ABC's John Muller has the story.
This morning, a small Missouri town is looking for the man in this sketch. He's not suspected of a crime, but a miracle.
I think that this time I've actually witnessed a guardian angel at work.
Sunday morning, a drunk driver hit Katie Lenz head on, pinning the 19-year-old in the front seat of her convertible. Her vital signs failing fast, she asked rescue crews to pray with her. That's when first responders say a man who looked like a Catholic priest seemed to appear out of nowhere, despite a 2-mile perimeter blocking the scene.
He began to pray and use the anointing oil. There was a calmness that to me seemed to come over the entire scene.
Another seemingly divine detail, firefighters say their equipment kept failing until that mystery man showed up.
The words were to remain calm, that our tools would now work. Instantaneously at that moment, our neighboring department arrived with fresh extrication tools.
Lenz was saved, but when crews turned around to thank the man, he'd vanished. This morning, Lenz is recovering in the hospital with broken legs and ribs, but some say it could have been worse, if not for that seemingly heavenly hero on the highway.
Whether it was just a priest as an angel, serving as an angel, or an actual angel that came in, he was an angel to all those and to Katie.
For Good Morning America, John Muller, ABC News, New York.
No, I've heard lots of stories like that too, about people appearing out of nowhere and helping people in difficult situations, and then they're gone. And then you talk to the witness, no, I was alone, there was no one with me, like, where do these people come from? So, now there's been reports of beings being seen around the, oh no, this was the, this is something different, that's right. This was in relation to, that's right. Well, this story sort of go down another direction, because sometimes people report situations, and not just beings appearing that look human, but through animals as well. And somehow the animal seems to, if they follow the animal, they're guided to a safe situation. And that just prompts me with another memory too, but I'll come back to that. So in this situation, these people referred to a butterfly angel that helped save the lives of 2 Chilean miners trapped underground in a mine in 2010. The mine was situated in the Atacama Desert and had a poor safety record. And on the 5th of August it collapsed, leaving 33 men trapped 2,000 feet below the ground. And after 69 days all men were rescued. But while they waited, 69 days for rescue, my goodness, can't imagine. While they waited, 2 of the miners told their colleagues of the butterfly that had saved their life. They recounted how the mine collapsed when they were driving along on another level of the mine in a pickup truck and noticed a small white butterfly. And it was unusual to see one so deep down a mine. And they slowed the truck and stopped to take a look. Seconds later, they had the collapse and a slab of rock crashed down, barely missing their vehicle. Had they not slowed to look at the butterfly, they would have driven into the area where the tunnel collapsed, and they would have been killed instantly. And terrified, they managed to drive to safety, finding the other 31 miners trapped on level 100, a safety zone only 50 square metres wide and half a mile underground. So I don't know what a butterfly is doing half a mile underground, but there you go. And you know, there's lots of stories where people in particular situations where people are visited by these animals, whether they're owls, butterflies, or birds of different descriptions, and they seem to be either harbingers of something about to happen, or those people feel that there's a connection, there's a message through those animals from their loved ones in spirit, or for other reasons, but spirit communicating with them. And there's quite a lot of that in the shamanic work, where animal messengers act as guides or helpers, basically. Now that leads us to the butterfly people. Now these beings are very, very interesting, because in Joplin, Missouri in 2011 there was an F5 tornado which it pulls everything apart. I mean everything. Hardly anything survives, as you can see there. That's a neighbourhood. I just thought I'd show you some photos of the after effects of that tornado to give you an idea of the conditions people were under when these strange things started to occur. Nothing left, absolutely nothing left. And cars went flying for not just, you know, a bit, but anything from hundreds of metres to kilometres, right? They were found. People were found like that. One small child was found wrapped up in a piece of carpet, and he said that he'd been wrapped up by beings that appeared to him a butterfly person, and gently placed down on the ground. So just give you an idea. Terrible to live through something like that.
Would that be an angel with wings though, a butterfly person?
Well, this is the question that we're about to explore. No, you're right. Because what happened was the children reported seeing butterfly people come as protectors in certain situations. But adults reported seeing hooded beings. Not everyone, of course, but there was the people, you know, handfuls of people reported these things as they were going into, when they went into the evacuation centres, or sorry, the recovery centres, rescue centres, I don't know what you call them. And after a while, when they got to talk to people, they were talking about their experiences, and this is what some people discovered. So this is one child's particular sketch of what happened, and this is of the case of there was a woman who had a 3-year-old daughter. They were outside when the tornado hit, and the mother saw a car careening towards them, and while protecting her daughter felt something touch her shoulder. It says she thought it was her car. I don't know about a car just touching your shoulder, but anyway. But her daughter said, "No, Mummy, it was butterfly people who touched you." So there's quite a few stories of these beings that came down and protected some people. Again, the question is, why some people? Okay. This is another sketch of an older child, Southwest Missouri butterfly angel. Now that's just starting to look like a Yowie angel, goodness knows what, right? So another child sketch of what she saw. These two are quite interesting. They were, where are they? They were 14 and 10 at the time, obviously not there. There were cousins actually, so it was Lage Grigsby, which is the girl I think, and Mason Lillard. Could be the other way around, I'm not really sure. I think Mason is the male. So rescue workers pulled Grigsby from the rubble of what had been a big box hardware store. Doctors at Freeman Hospital West were so certain Grigsby was dead they sent him to the morgue. Lillard's doctor was sure she'd be dead if the metal debris had punctured her body, that punctured her body had even been an inch off its trajectory. And a little bit one way it would have pierced her spine, the other her liver. So Grigsby and Lillard were in their grandparents' truck when the tornado hit, and the swirling 200-mile-per-hour winds picked up the truck, tossed it more than 300 feet across the parking lot. Grigsby was thrown from the vehicle, Lillard was pinned inside, but they both saw the same thing, people with wings. A hand touched Lillard's shoulder as she lay in the wreckage of her grandparents' vehicle. She thought it was Grigsby, but when she looked, it was something she didn't expect. Butterfly people. One with brown hair, the other blonde. And she said it was kind of calming, which is interesting. But the stories didn't end there. They started to flow in from all around the city. And of course, you've got to take into consideration that people were in these centres, and, you know, I guess you could say that children could be sharing stories, and they could be telling other stories and other stories and other stories. It's going to have that influence in there as well. Probably not so much with adults, because they might not want to talk about those things. But anyway, this is what they said. So children from all around the city reported seeing the same thing, people with wings, and they were always described as butterflies. Butterfly people standing and flying over them in the storm, protecting them from the raining debris. Wind tossed around a car of a man and his daughter, but the little girl wasn't afraid because beautiful butterfly people were sitting in the car with them. There was also an account from, not there, this one I think. There was a pastor who took some of his parish, they took shelter in the basement of the church, and they were trapped when all 4 walls collapsed into the basement, and they were saved by 6 very large men that none of them had ever seen before. And they lifted the walls away and the survivors walked out. Then the large men walked away saying they had more people to dig out. They weren't rescue workers. In fact, when the actual rescue workers arrived, they were dumbfounded by how they got out. And all the stories of the churchgoers match. The rescue workers said 6 men couldn't have lifted the walls. They were too heavy. The men were reported to be 8 feet tall. So there you go. Now we've also heard about 8 feet tall aliens too, haven't we? So they've got this mural here that they've included on the wall since, another one here, which is really nice, just to commemorate the stories of the children, basically. The interesting thing about Joplin, it's the buckle of the Bible Belt. So if the children were making this up, you would think that they would be talking about seeing angels, right? It's a really deeply religious area. It's the largest paranormal event for decades when it happened, but it was hardly known. Just like the, what would you say? I think the best paranormal event was the Visions of Fatima. I think that was just such an amazing event. And the residents want to brush the story aside because they don't want anything to do with it. So that they commemorated that for the children, but the adults don't really want to know anything about it. Okay, from the reports that I read. So yes, Ron, could it possibly be something like the Mothman? I wondered about that. Now step ahead of me. So, and we know the story of the Mothman, that was appearing up to the collapse of the Silver Bridge at Point Pleasant in 1967, giving warnings. Then we have the whole Indrid Cold being that was appearing, and just to people in the town. No one really knows who that is or what it was. But before the bridge collapse, it was appearing, and you can see someone's got a photo of this strange thing up on the bridge. This winged being with red eyes. This one had red eyes.
That wasn't at the same period of time.
This one?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But, you know, this winged being, or winged beings, have been seen in many different places at different times. Strange winged creature was seen at Chernobyl. At the World Trade Center in 2001, well, people reported seeing all sorts of things then, didn't they? And there were all types of precognitive experiences that people who died on the day that they had, and they told their partners, and then they went off and they died in the World Trade Center. Minnesota Bridge collapse. Winged creatures were seen there too.
Were they all the ones, the Mothman ones?
No, they were just winged creatures. They weren't classifying them as Mothman, just talking about winged creatures. And then, of course, in the past, I've always looked at this as proof of extraterrestrials. But is it? What is it that people were depicting in those ancient paintings? And this is of the crucifixion in 1350, and I know from reading in the Bible that there were Jesus' crucifixion was reported. There were 3 hours of darkness, there was earthquake, rock split, temple veil split, tombs were opened, saints appeared to many, Jesus appeared to many. I mean, who was Jesus if Jesus was a real personality? So this is where we get into just winding up about angels in space. This is really interesting. This was in 1984 when the Soviet cosmonauts in the Salyut 7 orbited the Earth on the 12th of July it was. Several cosmonauts, not crazy people but highly educated, intelligent people, trained astronaut pilots, scientists and even doctors. And what we saw were 7 giant figures in the forms of humans, but with wings and mist-like halos, as in the classic depiction of angels. And the heavenly visitors, they said, followed them for about 10 minutes and vanished as suddenly as they had appeared. However, 12 days later, cosmonauts Svetlana Savitskaya, Igor Volk and Vladimir Samaran, who had just joined the others on the space station, also saw the beings. Solyov and Atkov could no longer dismiss the phenomenon as a communal hallucination. They were glowing, they reported. We were truly overwhelmed. There was a great orange light and thought, it's just really hard to read here, and thought it, we could see,
Through it.
Through it, oh thank you. I'm sitting this far away and I can't see through. Through it, thank you. We could see the figures of 7 angels. And the cosmonauts went on to describe these mist-haloed beings as being nearly 80 feet in height, with a wingspan comparable to that of a 747 jet. Although it should be noted that there's no indication in the public record of how these men of science came to these proportional estimations. They were smiling as though they shared a glorious secret, but within a few minutes they were gone. Blah 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 blah. Yeah. So here we've got cosmonauts in space, in the space station, reported seeing something. Same with people who reported close encounters during the 1990s. They would often, these are people who we would call alien abductees, and they would talk about first seeing an animal. They might be driving along and they'll see a deer will just be standing on the road in front of them, often in country places, or just place out of the way places, and it will just be standing there and looking at them. Or a giant bird, like a giant owl, will be on the road, just there in front of them, and then they're looking at it and they're drawn to their eyes, and then the next thing they're somewhere else. They're in a spaceship and being probed and all those sorts of things. So, yeah, there's definitely links to these subjects. Yeah. What it means, I don't know. How it fits in with our religious history, angelic visitations, it's up for grabs really. Are they extraterrestrial? Are they beings that we don't understand, like the midways? Are they something that we are yet to discover, to understand, to put another name to? Because all these different names are just for us to be able to talk about a particular collection of knowledge and reports. But they probably belong together much more than we realise. And true shamans can control the weather. I don't know if anyone's ever done any research on that and documented that, but that's what I've heard. And these are very powerful shamans who've been struck by lightning and lived those, or have near-death experiences. But the lightning shamans are the most powerful, and they work with the elements, and they take them on and they feel them. That's what your dream is reminding me of, actually. Yeah. Well, folks, we've run out of time. Another interesting day again.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it. Food for thought. This is the whole point of this group, is food for thought and to share your experiences. If anyone would love to record a story anonymously, we would love it if you would before you leave. And then we can play it on the Strange Encounters show. No one will know who you are. Okay, so yeah, but thanks for coming along today, everyone.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Thank you for sharing your personal story.